The first piece of work that I've made for the biennial is called Cop Talk. And for this project, it's like a global campaign where I work on behalf of the police forces in countries, and I organize for them to visit art schools and give recruitment presentations. So the art students have the opportunity to see what a career in the police force might be, and to see if they could do that. For a country to have a police force that serves the country well, it should reflect the makeup of its society, to do with race and gender. I guess I can just imagine a situation where we could have a better police force if there were constituent members that came from a liberal arts school background. For the artist side, as we know, it's very difficult to have a career in the arts, and a lot of people would do other things. And it's possible that they could apply their skills at an art school to the occupation of a police officer. I wanted to break down some stereotypes. They're almost like polar opposites. They're kind of like obvious polar opposites, if anything. So I was interested to see how the police would interact with the students and vice versa. And what tends to happen is that it's like putting up a two-way mirror. So the students hear hear themselves, and the police likewise. To play with people's expectations, to play with to play with cultural stereotypes, and to see if these might dissolve in a situation like this. And I've done this project here in Taipei in June. I heard the response was very good. Exactly what the art students wouldn't expect. Well, it's a very different example for somebody who is comes in and perhaps not wearing their uniform and is just talking about it as a career like any other career. That's a very different encounter with a police officer than when they perhaps want to arrest you on the street for drinking a beer. You know, it's Okay. Hi. I've only done this project twice before. The first time was in the United Nations Plaza in Berlin. I heard about what had happened in the Halifax conference in Nova Scotia College in the early 70s. And during that time there was a conference which I think was organized by Seth Siegelap, where he separated the people who were discussing from the audience itself. So they were in a separate room, and it was piped down to like a canteen room where the students would sit. Not much is written about this, so I guess the way that I interpreted this was that maybe you can have a higher level of discussion if you're not performing as you're speaking. So you could imagine that for a true conversation can only happen when you don't know what the next person is going to say. And if you're performing to the public, you're kind of aware what the other person's standpoint is, to a certain extent. And perhaps people fall back on their customary thoughts. So by separating the speakers from the audience, I hope that the conversation might reach a higher, more interesting level. Home entertainment is a Windvane on top of the roof of the museum. It was interesting putting the Windvane on the roof because the museum is under a flight path. And I didn't realize quite how close the flight path is to the museum until I was on the roof installing the piece. And you could see the passengers' faces looking down out of the windows almost. The museum, when I saw it on photographs and documentation, it seemed to be like very much an archetypal state museum. It's very kind of like grand and self-imposing, and it's saying this here is where the culture is. With the Windvane, it says it points to home entertainment, and a Windvane you normally find on the top of a spire and so forth. It belongs to a very different vernacular, usually a church vernacular. So I was interested to see how what I think of as like quite a timid aesthetic, how that would sit with the aesthetic of the museum, with what I spoke about earlier. And then as far as the words go, I think it kind of like in a very simple manner, it just points to elsewhere, to home, to say, perhaps to suggest that culture lies elsewhere. And then the words themselves, home entertainment, we associate that with home entertainment systems and home theatre and home cinema. And that's kind of like, there's quite an interesting history behind that, in that it started off as very much an upper class, wealthy preserve, in that you had to be very wealthy to have your own theatre in your house, where you'd show stag films to your friends and so forth. Now, many people can have a home theatre system. So, in a very tokenistic manner, you could think of it as being like the democratization of culture. How far you can sincerely believe that is questionable, but I want to suggest these things with the work.